Alien technology. In the mid-20th century, U.S. Army research and development at the Pentagon brought the world into a new age. Incredible advances were made, which helped bring Americans to the highest standard of living ever achieved by a nation. Were outside sources and government influences involved in the origins of high technology? Does the new quantum leap in technological sophistication suggest the role of some outside influence? Could technology like the microchip, which is ubiquitous in our lives, have come from an extraterrestrial source? Is it alien technology?
If the acquisition of alien technology is a fact, that certainly could have happened. My guess is that if we did pick up any technology at all, it would have then landed in a very sensitive, compartmentalized intelligence area, in which only a very limited number of people would have access to that information.
In the late 40s, the U.S. military recovered a spacecraft of unknown origin that utilized extraordinarily advanced technology for propulsion, communication, surveillance, and scientific inquiry. This technology was previously only theorized by scientists. This shocking discovery prompted President Harry S. Truman to organize the Majestic 12, an elite group of high-level government officials, military officers, scientists, and academicians. They devised a plan to dissect and assess the potential application of these technologies for military and commercial use. This process came to be known as reverse engineering. With the advent of the Cold War, the Majestic 12 and its program was conducted under the highest level of secrecy since the Manhattan Project. Their goal was to disseminate these technologies to the private sector at firms which were already developing technologies garnered from the war effort. In August of 1947, an alien-created microcircuitry artifact was delivered to Bell Labs. Bell Labs was ready for the challenge of reverse engineering. Within 5 months, by December of that same year, Bell Labs would introduce to the public the first electronic transistor. Bell Labs physicists Walter Brattain, John Bardeen, and William Shockley were the first to successfully reverse engineer microcircuitry. This first example of reverse engineered technology showed crudeness in the area of micromanipulation of particles. The revolutionary ability to control electrons would permanently replace the crude vacuum tube bulb.
First of all, Shockley and his team had been working on transistor technology. Of course, nobody called it a transistor back then, but they were working on this technology, basically an electronic gate to send electrons through that was more efficient than the vacuum tube. Now, the workbench notes that they had back then, the notes themselves were reverse engineered. They didn't publish those workbench notes until after 1949.
Soon, all life on Earth would be affected by this application of outside information. On the day that was declared, the day of discovery, life on this planet changed. Later, General Arthur Trudeau took over the responsibility of distributing technological artifacts from U.S. Army R&D offices at the Pentagon. Colonel Philip J. Corso, intelligence officer for Army Research and Development at the Pentagon, was the first to step forward with information about alien technology.
In 1997, when Lieutenant Colonel Corso published his national best-selling book, Neither the federal government nor any corporation or individual sought to discredit or refute his revelations about the Pentagon distributing alien technology to the private sector.
All this was known, only it wasn't known in the form where we gave an artifact to somebody. We gave them research and development projects.
One of the things that strikes you most about Philip Corso is not just the fact that he sounds credible, but when you go into his background and you look at the places he's been and where he served and what assignments he's had through the different wars from World War II through Korea, then back to the Pentagon, when you look at that, what you see is that the guy just rings credible. He is like rivet plate metal. Trudeau brought him in. He sat at the foreign technology desk as the deputy at that desk for 90 days, and then he went black. He went secret and became Trudeau's deputy and carry out Trudeau's own assignment, which was get this material from the spacecraft into American industry, the only place it could be safe.
Are these alien technologies? What kinds of applications did we reverse engineer from outside technologies?
Here, Corso said in 1961, he was looking at what turned out to be a fully functional electronic microcircuit. And they brought those, he said, to Bell Labs, because they knew that back in 1947, Trudeau had told him that the Truman administration, that the Army had brought wiring panels from that, they called it a lander. They called it an alien lander. They brought that to New Jersey, where Bell Labs was. And what Truman said to them back in 1947 was, he didn't know what this was, but he said, what is the lowest common denominator? What is the least complicated device you can create, you can reverse engineer from this?
How did we show seeming mastery of the atom without a complete understanding of it? For thousands of years, our concept of the atom was very simple. Only now do we know otherwise. Albert Einstein was the first known theorist on stimulated emission and general and special relativity. These provided a simple conception of the atom for people of the 20th century.
One of these atoms probably would appear as a tiny elastic sphere, a sphere formed by negatively charged electrons swarming around a massive nucleus of positive electricity.
Public opinion holds Albert Einstein as the foremost authority of the atom. Yet, he did all of his work without ever actually seeing one. Today's scientific activity is being done on the quantum level. Theoretical universal string theories contradict some of Einstein's presumptions on the nature of universal law. Regardless of how scientific theory has developed, recent trends in reverse engineering of alien technology couldn't have begun without these scientific foundations.
What does the atom mean to us today? No one had ever seen the atom until the present, but the concept has already helped shape society. Is the microchip an intrusion from an outside source? There should have been a parallel in our understanding of what was being created. Without a parallel comprehension of this technological quantum leap, the result has been social disintegration, alienation, and dysfunction. Our scientific understanding has reached downward to the submolecular world and upward to a new global awareness. Yet these advances contradict a diminishing sense of both community and of our responsibility to Earth and to its future generations. The reverse engineering theory holds that the most advanced technology is the result of an outside influence.
Looking at technological advances today and trying to explain how those breakthroughs came about in our society, either way, reverse engineering fits right along with the natural progression of things when new technologies emerge.
Critics of this viewpoint put reverse engineering into a category that includes paranormal mythology. Well, this is merely an excuse to discount evidence that would lead to a new perspective. Nevertheless, the microchip has become an integral part of many of the electrical machines and appliances that we use today. Its fundamental purpose is to manipulate electrons at the molecular level to perform as electronic switches. In 1958, it was Jack Kilby who was credited with inventing the microchip.
In 1965, semiconductor pioneer Gordon Moore predicted that the number of transistors contained on a computer chip would double every year. This is now known as Moore's Law. Deciphering the microprocessor took 23 years. The microprocessor brought us to increased speed of control of information. In 1970, when Ted Hoff revealed the microprocessor, how much was known about electron behavior? For decades, electrons worked in microprocessors while scientists tried to figure out exactly how they worked. At that time, research was still all in theory. We had no understanding of micro-manipulating mechanisms, ion beam implantation, and electron beam lithography, all used now in manufacturing of electronics. Picosecond imaging circuit analysis is currently used at IBM to study the behavior of electrons in microprocessors. Circuit analysis has produced this high-powered camera to study microcircuitry. A picture of the speeding electron is taken within a trillionth of a second. It has been 40 years since the microchip was invented. Why only now are researchers seeing the submolecular level? Since we can only now recognize electrons at the atomic level, does this support the notion that reverse engineering produced this technology?
Is our modern use of microchips and other advanced technologies actually a result of alien technology? Why was the development of alien technology so clandestine? And why would it be so harmful for the public to have this knowledge? What would happen if we learned about the true origins of the laser?
Light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. In 1958, surrounded by much controversy, the laser was introduced. The controversy was a result of the dispute over the question of the inventor of the laser. The litigation that ensued only confuses the fact that no one can claim to be the sole inventor of these technologies.
Well, the basic idea really isn't so very complicated. This is a system for amplifying light waves, and it does it something like this, that inside of this tube, we give atoms excess energy by passing an electric current through them. The light wave travels through these atoms then, takes away some of their energy, and thereby amplifies the light wave. It becomes more and more energetic. It's reflected here, passes through again, is amplified more, reflected again, and passes back and forth many times until it becomes very intense. And one can see here the beam coming out. It travels along a very long distance without spreading very much.
Credited as the inventors of the laser, did Arthur Scalo, Charles Towns, or Gordon Gould know where the outside information came from? The laser comes from the application of stimulated emission to a crystal. A photon is introduced through optical pumping. Mirrors are used for multiplying the emission of active photons. How was the idea of the use of mirrors introduced into laser development? This burst in radiation, as all the atoms discharge photons, results in a cascade of light. The beam generated by most lasers is pencil thin and maintains its size and direction over great distances.
Army laboratory at Columbia University, which staged its first test on a laser right around 1960. That's where they took the laser cutting tool. Not to say this is what a laser is. They already knew what a laser was. What they needed was a working benchmark model of what they could reverse engineer to get a quantum leap on the very technology they were trying to develop.
Technology has now harnessed light. The molecular arrangement of crystal gives direction to light. It is the same molecular arrangement that contains light. We now control information in this light. Some of the companies that were involved in reverse engineering of fiber optics are Bell Labs, Hughes Aircraft, General Electric, IBM, and Corning Glass. Research was done by thousands of people before the mystery of light unraveled. Unlike Thomas Edison and the light bulb, people are not aware that Charles Kao contributed to one of the greatest achievements in technology, the harnessing of light. Why isn't Kao a household name? Has he been lost in the process of reverse engineering?
Fiber optics have been manufactured and sold to the public with no question as to its origins. 1,000,000 years of evolution overnight. How did this happen?
Smaller than a human hair, the fiber is 2 layers, a crystal core with a glass layer. 2 strands of fiber optic cables can carry over 1,000 conversations. Light is reflected inward from the interface of the 2 layers. Even though alien crystal fiber applications may surpass our current scientific understanding, fiber optics is so far our greatest reverse engineering achievement. Evidence of high technology continues to surface from locations all around the world, dating back thousands of years. The precision attained by these artifacts is a paradox. Present-day scholars remain mystified by the high technology of the ancients. No accurate record has ever been found which has information about the origins of these technologies. Frank Drake, Harvard astronomer, formulated an equation to speculate at the number of intelligent, communicating civilizations there are in our galaxy. N represents the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Current estimates of this number are 100 billion. P is the fraction of stars that have planets around them. Current estimates range from 20% to 50%. E is the number of planets per star that are capable of sustaining life. Estimates range from 1 to 5. L is the fraction of planets in E, where life evolves. I is the fraction of L, where intelligent life evolves. C is the fraction of I that communicate. L is the fraction of the planet's life during which the communicating civilizations live. The answer, N, is the number of communicating civilizations in the galaxy. According to Drake, even the most pessimistic estimates yield hundreds to thousands of communicating civilizations. Through the media, we are already sensitized to the possibility of alien life forms. To maintain a logical perspective is a challenge considering our point of reference is only the popular media.
The dominant worldview that we've all been raised in for several hundred years now is that we are alone in a lifeless universe. I think even if a better worldview or a more truthful one or one that opens up consciousness to a much more interesting universe, even when that would be the result, change is still resisted because whatever your existing worldview is, it gives us a kind of complacent sense that we understand our world, and when something comes along that completely shatters that, then we don't understand. We don't have control. Anything else can follow, you know.
We're not human!
A half a century ago, alien technology made an immediate impact.
On Halloween night of 1938, Orson Welles' radio program War of the Worlds showed just how Americans would react to news of alien contact. The program caused pandemonium. Some people even committed suicide.
Turn you to Carl Phillips at Grover's Mill.
Ladies and gentlemen, here I am. Wait a minute, something's happening. There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror and it leaps right at the advancing men. Lord, they're turning into flames.
Extremely surprised to learn that a story which has become familiar to children through the medium of comic strips should have had such an immediate and profound effect upon radio listeners.
Flying saucers have invaded our planet. The whole world is under attack. Can it survive?
The U.S. government took note of the public's reaction to the show. Since then, the government's position has been very cautious on this topic.
I don't know what the government knows about this. There isn't the government anyway. There are different pockets within the government that guard certain knowledge they have very closely. So I really don't know, but I am struck by the fact that government agencies, when they do have to speak about this, will send out the most naked disinformation. There's this level of sort of committed ignorance around this, which is, I think, extraordinary. It's as if any kind of ignorance, any kind of distortion is okay if it's in the service of not letting in certain unacceptable information.
James Forrestal was a member of the Majestic 12 group, and it was suspected that information that he had from his tenure with Majestic 12 contributed to his tragic death. He was an admiral in the Pacific Fleet during World War II, and his military accomplishments were honored by the aircraft carrier bearing his name.
In March of 1949, James Forrestal jumped out of his window at the Bethesda Naval Hospital just months after resigning his position as First Secretary of Defense.
A shocked nation mourns the tragic death of James Forrestal, America's first Secretary of Defense.
Why would a celebrated hero of World War II then commit suicide during peacetime? Was his reaction no different than those who heard War of the Worlds? What information did he have about this conspiracy that he brought to his grave? The government continues to be silent.
It's interesting, when something is attacking or challenging the ideology of a culture, then anything goes. The media can do anything. They can present distortions, lies, bring in people who don't know anything in a way that you can't do in other fields, which is really kind of interesting, which again reflects the fact that anything but that this should be true. Any weapon can be used to fight this reality in terms of how it gets represented to the public.
Ever since the middle of the century, Americans have been getting accustomed to the notion that we are not alone in the universe.
I think there's no question that the tendency to show extraterrestrial encounters as either comical or sinister does influence a certain number of people who don't know any better. There's a tendency to represent the contact with whatever you want to call this, this other, this intelligence that's reaching us, tends to represent it as frightening, as dark, taking over. We have to fight them, sort of like movies like Independence Day, which show us somehow conquering this terrible alien invasion.
The public's views showed a dramatic change during the early 60s with a boom in popularity of sci-fi movies.
The public felt a sense of security by relegating alien contact to the realm of entertainment, while in the real world, the government tried to explain away UFOs with reasons like swamp gas and weather balloons.
New movies and broadcasting has proved that society's views have evolved.
The public is more open to this than the elite, the general public. If I meet people in a bar or in the street or have seen something I've done on TV, oh yeah, we understand that. That makes sense.
Popular culture has portrayed extraterrestrials in a more intellectual light.
Individuals in the military have come forward with contact information, but no official statement has been made to confirm or deny any such evidence. Whenever such evidence is brought forward by a private citizen, the response has generally been skepticism. As a result, the public remains doubtful about the credibility of these phenomena because of insufficient information. Perhaps the only logical conclusions that we can draw are the ones that come from our own self-examination.
The kind of technology that we now have is a product essentially of the scientific revolution and the Industrial Revolution. And that is why I spent so much time researching the story of the Luddites. Because the Luddites were people in England at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution who said, wait, what is this technology going to do to us in particular, to our jobs, to our families, to our communities, to the environment? And they said they didn't like these new steam technologies coming in. They didn't like these new factories that were being produced because they did people out of jobs. And they said they took their torches and they took their rifles and they took their hammers and they smashed those factories. The government of England, in response to this, mounted the greatest armed force against its own citizens that it has ever done. And within about 3 or 4 years managed to put down this Luddite rebellion. And so the Industrial Revolution was allowed to proceed. These people were done out of their jobs, their communities were destroyed, the environment was black. And this is the kind of stuff that Dickens eventually wrote about. The awful price that had to be paid so that the Industrial Revolution could succeed. And so I wrote about these Luddites and told the story of what they did then, and then I tried to bring it forward 150 years to talk about the people today who are resisting the trends of modern high technology.
The fact is that the initial big bang of technological innovation and progress was soon followed by the marriage of the military elite to private companies who exploited this technology and have made billions of dollars from it.
Silicon Valley produces 68 millionaires per week. It has opened up the economy to a whole new territory.
NASA Ames research and Silicon Valley are recognizing that alien technology is now public knowledge. Yet the government is still secretive about reverse engineering that is continuing today. For example, special agents from NASA's Office of the Inspector General are investigating private entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley.
On October 5th, 1999, I did a story for the San Francisco Examiner about a meeting that was going to be held here in California between people at the NASA Ames Research Center and high-tech Silicon Valley executives. We checked it out and it turned out that they were indeed going to have this meeting. Subsequent to that story, got a call from a NASA investigator that was really concerned because at that meeting they were going to be talking about propulsion technologies, and Joe Firmage was interested in those technologies because he firmly believes that there is reverse engineering of alien technologies that have helped Silicon Valley be what it is today.
Thinking about the computer revolution and its effect on society, you would be blind not to realize how dangerous and pernicious and evil it has been. And I say that in the full recognition that there are individuals who have benefited from it, and that there are certain connections that have been made, and people love to have their email, and they love to be able to be online for this and that. But all of that is trivial. Trivial, whatever tiny personal enjoyments or benefits it has produced for individuals. The important thing about this technology is to see what it has done to the world. It's true that a few will be richer and richer, but what happens in a society, in a global society, where there are just a few rich and there are masses of poor? It is unsustainable. What I'm spelling out for you here is a scenario that inevitably leads to tragedy. And we can see it happening already. But I think it won't be more than 20 years or so before all of this collapses. Because we have these dominant government corporate forces eating up the world, pushing people aside, and attempting to create a world that is entirely artificially, entirely technology dominated. A technosphere that will eliminate the biosphere.
Alien technology causes destruction of our environment at a rapid rate. Its power is beyond what we are able to control. The destructive effects reach out to all areas of the Earth and the life that it sustains. How much time do we have before it is too late to reverse the damage from alien technology? People, disconnected from nature, abuse our ecosystem, which degrades our planet to near fatal levels. Our production of waste rivals our production of technologies that improve the human condition.
Think of this. Over there on Wall Street is the beginning process by which $4 trillion is being traded around the world every single day. $4 trillion. Now, you don't trade that stuff buying and selling around the world without having an effect, a real-life effect upon the jobs and the lives and the communities of people. But the psychological effects of all of this are to distance people from the real things that they need in their lives. Love, sodality, community, poetry, dreams, all of the important things. So what I see happening is an accumulation of environmental crises melding with these economic and political crises so that the whole thing collapses. Now, it's possible that the human species will survive that. But it will do so only if it's in vastly reduced numbers, people living in small, nature-regarding communitarian societies. That is to say, tribal societies, much the way humans have lived for 90% of the time they've been on Earth. They've lived in those kinds of nature-loving, nature-regarding, small-scale societies. I think it's possible that we might get back to that. On the other hand, if the pollution, if the destruction is as great as it might well be, it will threaten the existence of the human species on the Earth.
Is this the first global technological crisis of its kind? Are we living in a world where all of the technology that we depend on could stop functioning? Or does alien technology have a manifest destiny of its own to dominate the globe?
Alien technology has fragmented our system of representation. It fragments communities and alienates people from each other as it takes control. The portability of information may ultimately erode privacy. Soon, people will carry their electronic identity within their skin. This information will be read and tracked by anyone who has the equipment to do so.
The gap between those who control the technological machinery and those who are controlled by it may determine what life will be like for the next generation.
Will there be more government control over the economy? Will there be more government control over our lives?
A bold new world order.
Or is it technology that is controlling our lives? In politically underdeveloped countries, alien technology has fatal consequences. The U.S. military will not come forward with information surrounding the development of alien technology. Research continues as defense technology reaches for more sophisticated and lethal weapons. The government's priority is to maintain military and economic supremacy and keep the secrets of alien technology that created its power. The American defense system has increased its contractual research with private companies. These companies research independently and operate under total secrecy under the authority of national security.
In his 1961 farewell address to the nation, President Eisenhower warned us of the dangers caused by the very situation that our country finds itself in today.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. Akin to and largely responsible for the sweeping changes in our industrial military posture has been the technological revolution during recent decades. Yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
The social, economic, political, and environmental consequences of the unbridled rapid growth of technology in all phases of our lives beget a fundamental question. Are we the master of, or the slaves to high technology? Do we expect technology to be the solution to our problems? Perhaps we have lost the ability to reassert control over our lives. We may be so technologically dependent that any failure in the system could lead to a catastrophe like a nuclear meltdown. Can we forestall or prepare for such a catastrophe if we are unable or unwilling to address these issues now at a time of unprecedented prosperity?
Every major city in the United States is a part of only 3 power grids that supply all of our energy. These systems were built on a computer language called COBOL, Common Business Oriented Language. This computing language was developed by the U.S. Navy in 1957 under the authority of Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter of Harry Truman's Majestic 12. Naval officer G.M. Hopper directed the group that wrote the COBOL language. Why was the U.S. Navy involved in creating a language for use in our land-based power grids? Was the Navy's programming knowledge the only way to reverse engineer alien processors?
Socially, we are in danger of losing our sense of humanity, our sense of morality, even our sense of family and its critical role in our society. We need to assess the consequences our frenzied electronic way of life has on our planet.
Breakthroughs in medical and drug research hold out the promise of treatment, cure, and prevention of our most dreaded diseases, even cancer and AIDS. Computer technology enhances our ability to diagnose, treat, and cure illness. Magnetic resonance imaging can provide doctors with detailed 3D images of affected organs and tissues. Advances in cardiac surgery techniques continue to enable physicians and practitioners to battle the #1 killer in the United States, heart disease. Nearly 1,000 satellites orbit the Earth daily and contribute to our increased knowledge of our planet and its atmosphere and weather. Scientists deploy increasingly sophisticated weather radar. Forecasts pinpoint dangerous weather patterns today more quickly and accurately than ever before.
Good evening. Hurricane Andrew continues on its path towards the southeast Florida coast at this hour. The center of the hurricane is expected to cross the Dade-Broward area sometime between 6 and 8 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Because of this advanced technology, communities have more time to take emergency measures in the face of a violent storm. The deployment of the Hubble telescope in the mid-1990s allows man to see to the very edge of the universe. Extraordinary images of deep space astonish and electrify us. The recent World Trade Organization protests in Seattle were led by labor, environmental, humanist neo-Luddites, and fringe groups focused on economic and environmental issues. Yet pollution and waste have already done substantial damage. Ironically, a comparatively low-tech alternative to fossil fuel and uranium is wind power. In some regions, it provides clean, reliable energy which could significantly reduce our reliance on imported oil, coal, or nuclear power. Unfortunately, the nuclear power industry is encouraged to develop, through government subsidies, several times the amount that solar or wind power development will ever receive. With the internet eclipsing 1 billion pages and counting, today's e-revolution is spurring an unprecedented global economic boom. E-commerce is expected to top several $1 trillion in the next few years. Alan Greenspan, chairman of the Federal Reserve, pointed out the critical role of high technology in the growth and reshaping of our economy and society.
There are few signs to date of slowing in the pace of innovation and the spread of our newer technologies that, as I have indicated in previous testimonies, have been at the root of our extraordinarily impressive productivity improvement. What is uncertain is the future pace of the application of these innovations, because it is this pace that governs the rate of change in productivity and economic potential.
Since nearly any human being can link up individually to the rest of the world, the Internet may be the greatest mechanism of democracy ever made. Yet with such unlimited worldwide access to each other, how will our lives be affected? Just in the last few months, serious concerns over privacy and safety on the net have spurred government and corporate responses to arrest and prosecute hackers and other criminals. We may never find definite answers to the mysteries of alien technologies, but because of mankind's discovery and development of extraterrestrial tools, humanity has raced generations beyond our time, closer to our own enlightenment, or destruction, as a species.
Furthermore, the rapid pace of technological change has only magnified these problems. So where does it all end? The disparity between the rich and poor nations and individuals continues to grow. The destruction of the rainforests and other habitat, nuclear proliferation, biological weapons, global warming, and ozone depletion show the immediate and direct consequences of technology gone amok. America is the largest arms merchant in the world. This undermines our credibility as a nation of peace. Recent wars in Iraq and Yugoslavia also show the trend toward high-tech electronic warfare, where drones, cruise missiles, and global positioning satellites enable the Pentagon to wage truly impersonal surgical war. Since the Big Bang of technology in the mid-20th century, we have seen the application and misapplication of this reverse-engineered alien technology in every aspect of our lives. We must raise our consciousness on a personal, emotional, global, and even spiritual level. We need to demystify and emasculate the iconography of technology. Maybe we can think and act less selfishly, with a greater sense of community, both locally and globally. Collectively, we can insist that our government, major corporations, academia, and the military seriously consider the consequences of our technological revolution. As citizens, we must insist our leaders address these issues both here and abroad. Globally, the U.S., as the world's sole superpower, must take the lead in shaping and applying high technology. America and its allies must press for a more thoughtful, slower approach to technological change. The Internet is the latest and perhaps an especially sinister example of high technology being used to foster racism, bigotry, and hatred. Our power is not through one person or group or nation. Collectively, we as human beings must fight against complacency, indifference, and ignorance. The world is shrinking every day, and we must act now to save our own humanity. The infinite power of the human mind and spirit can help us harness technology while protecting and healing ourselves and Mother Earth. Otherwise, we may eventually be doomed to nuclear, biological, or technological oblivion.
contact by 12 o'clock. Very bright yellow object.
4,000 feet above the ocean, a pilot and his passenger see two enormous yellow objects.
There is no absolute explanation.
The captain of another commercial jetliner watches an impossibly large disk fly under him and become invisible.
The dimension was huge, absolutely huge.
Now, pilots are coming forward to relive these incredible events.
So we'll be flying really the exact position and direction.
Exactly the same route.
And their colossal encounters are revealed on tape.
I have no idea what it was. Say away from 17,000.
Are UFO sightings growing to epic proportions?
This can turn out to be one of the most critical UFO sightings.
This is case number 86206. Giant UFOs.
It just flew right over me.
April 23rd, 2007, approximately 3 p.m. A pilot for Orani Airlines is flying a pedestrian route over the English Channel. In the distance, he suddenly sees a brilliant yellow light. He immediately radios his sighting into Jersey Air Traffic Control. He has just spotted something gigantic, something he claims is almost a mile wide. These are actual radio communications between the cockpit and air traffic control.
Do you have any traffic by 12 o'clock level?
No traffic at all in your 12 o'clock.
Roger, I've got an extremely bright yellow-orange object straight ahead. Very flat platform. I'm looking at it through binoculars as we speak.
After initially seeing nothing, Jersey Air Traffic Control then confirms the object on radar. They also receive visual confirmation from a second pilot on another airline. Soon after, a second enormous object is sighted by the original pilot. He says it is smaller than the first, but still thousands of feet across.
Looking through binoculars as I am now, there's a second one just appeared behind the first one from where I am.
Neither the pilot nor his air traffic controller are able to explain what these colossal objects are or where they came from.
We're here in the UK, and these are not your everyday sightings. These are not little lights in the sky. What we have are descriptions of huge disc-shaped craft, strange objects that these pilots have never seen before.
I'm a pilot myself. I'm really interested to meet these pilots who are actually far more experienced than I am, who have seen something that they believe is a UFO.
You've got huge objects that dominate the landscape around them, that overwhelm the planes they're flying, and you've got proximity. Pilots fly closer to these objects and see them closer than any other witness.
With these sightings of massive UFOs reported by multiple pilots, the investigation is focusing on these high-caliber witnesses. Dr. Ted Ackworth will recreate the original Orani flight over the English Channel with the pilot and his passengers.
I can't wait to meet them, sit with them in the cockpits of their aircraft, and kind of get from their mouths their stories of what they saw.
Pat Uskert will scrutinize the physical descriptions of these airborne giants with an atmospheric scientist.
I want to get a complete description of the objects and eliminate atmospheric phenomena, balloons, or anything else that could be in the sky, and make sure that we're talking about legitimate UFOs.
And Bill Burns will examine both the eyewitness testimony and the follow-up reports to these incredible incidents.
Pilot activity is full of science. It's full of engineering. It's full of routine. You take all that science and you apply it to something so unusual that's never been before, Now you have something you can investigate.
Joining the team is documentary filmmaker James Fox, a researcher who was one of the first to speak with the Orani Airlines pilot after his sighting in 2007.
I met with Captain Ray Boyer about 2 months after his original sighting, and I think it's important for us to get up and recreate the flight path to get his perspective on what took place.
Though encounters with giant UFOs are rare in comparison to most UFO sightings, they are not unheard of. In 2000, a British housewife in Bonsall claims to witness what some estimated to be a nearly 3-mile-wide pink and white disc. In 1996, over a 134-mile stretch of highway in Canada's Yukon Territory, more than 30 witnesses confirmed seeing a saucer-shaped object bigger than a football field. Triangulation data later revealed the object to be at least half a mile wide. And in 1986, the pilot of a Japanese Airlines flight traveling between Iceland and Anchorage, Alaska, reported 3 objects trailing his 747. 2 of the objects were small, but the captain described the third as twice the size of an aircraft carrier. The giant object was tracked by ground and airborne radar. And the FAA logged over 60 minutes of data confirming the anomaly. Why do massive UFOs appear to be tracking our commercial aircraft? Captain Ray Boyer's encounter occurs on April 23rd as he captains Orani Airlines Flight 544 from Southampton to the island of Alderney, one of several small islands located in the channel. His audio transmissions from the flight show a pilot fully aware of his unusual situation. He attempts to get as much information about the objects as possible.
544, any more information on that aircraft, please?
544, negative. It's just a primary contact that we sometimes get anaprop on the radar. There is something possibly your left 10 o'clock at a range of 3 miles this time.
I've got a definite contact by 12 o'clock. Very bright yellow object looking, well, like a cigar.
His sighting expands to include a second massive object. And he is not the only one able to see something.
Roger, 544, just confirming that all the passengers can see this aircraft. It's dead ahead, can't say how far, probably 5 miles, but it's staying the same size. Looks to be off the northwest coast of Alderney.
But the flight is short, and Boyer soon finds himself safely landing the aircraft on Alderney. Air traffic control on the nearby island of Jersey alerts several other pilots coming into the airspace about Boyer's sighting.
If you could keep a good lookout as you pass down the side of Alderney. We've cross-referenced this with traffic inbound to Jersey from the south, which saw the objects from the vicinity of Sark towards Alderney at the same level.
Golf Romeo, we've copied all that. Keeping a good lookout, sir.
Thank you.
But when they arrive, they see nothing. The objects are gone. Once on the ground, Captain Boyer makes a few quick diagrams of what he sees and sends his logs to operations. The reaction to the event is thorough, and Bill and Pat are hoping that Boyer's immediate actions following the encounter might reveal more information.
What made you come forward?
Law. It's what you have to do. It's the British system. If you see an object or other aircraft or that shouldn't be where it is, then you have to make a report.
So this is a standard report that pilots have to fill out when they see a UFO, and they're encouraged to.
It's not necessarily just for UFOs, it's for something unusual in controlled airspace. It could be another aircraft which shouldn't be there. Maybe it hasn't been picked up by radar. And if you see it, then you've got to report that. That's the rules.
According to the United Kingdom Civil Aviation Authority, quote, a reportable occurrence in relation to aircraft means any incident which endangers, or which, if not corrected, would endanger an aircraft, its occupants, or any other person.
What is the standard reaction when a pilot sees something in airspace?
In British airspace, all I can say is it's just what's done. In American airspace, I understand that there's companies out there that don't want this sort of thing talked about, and I've heard that some pilots have been threatened that if they do talk about this sort of thing, they'll be fired.
Though he isn't ridiculed or threatened, Boyer's account is met with little interest. The British government declares the incident unworthy of any follow-up investigation.
The British military did not come back with any response immediately, although they did issue a few days later a statement stating that as the sighting wasn't of any threat to UK airspace, then they weren't going to investigate any further, and that perhaps the French might like to do that. The French came back with a response saying that if the British military were interested in operating some system over this matter, then they should do so, but neither have come back with anything.
Alderney, Jersey, and the other surrounding islands are dependencies of the United Kingdom, but are in close proximity to French airspace. Boyer finds it surprising that neither country is interested in the event, despite corroborating radar hits and the audio confirmation of a second pilot from Blue Island Airlines.
Jersey Blue Island 832, the zone asked us to look if we could see an object which is being seen by A-Line at the moment. But we've got something about 8 o'clock resembling the description.
Roger, and 832, Roger. What range would you estimate that target?
Around about a similar range to Alderney from us now.
Have you talked to that pilot?
Yeah, I've had a chat with him. Unfortunately, his company don't want him to come forward. He's also wanting to stay away from the limelight.
Well, what did he tell you?
He saw it from about 20 miles away and described the object pretty much similar to myself.
This is probably one of the best, most corroborated, most credible UFO sightings we've ever encountered. And that's mainly because of the way Ray Bowyer took extra care to make sure his witnesses were with him in that sighting.
The Blue Island pilot remains silent to this day, a key eyewitness, unwilling or unable to discuss what he saw. But other witnesses aboard Orani Flight 544 are willing to come forward to discuss the strange events they witnessed above the English Channel. They, along with Captain Boyer, are about to relive the same flight from April 23, 2007. And another sighting shows massive size isn't the only surprising characteristic of these craft.
Became transparent and disappeared.
Almost like it dematerialized.
On April 23, 2007, an Orani Airlines pilot and his passengers claimed to see two giant yellow-orange objects during a routine flight over the English Channel. The pilot, Captain Ray Bowyer, claims the objects are a mile wide and possibly larger. Ted and documentary filmmaker James Fox are prepping a flight aboard the same aircraft, flying the identical route from 2007.
He needed to follow a preconceived flight plan. He was in communication with air traffic control. He was flying under instrument flight rules. You really have to follow the procedure there. So would you just describe the parameters for the flight?
Sure. It's a Trilander aircraft, 18-seater. We'll be heading, as you said, south-southwest, climbing initially to 2,000 feet.
So we'll be flying really over the exact position and direction.
Exactly the same route, same height, altitude, and very similar weather conditions today.
Joining the journey are Kate and John Russell, two passengers aboard the April 23rd flight. They also witnessed the gigantic yellow-orange objects in the sky. The plane is a Britten-Norman Trilander, a small-range aircraft used primarily for short-distance flights. It is 49 feet, 3 inches long. The alleged UFOs are described as being over a mile long, more than 100 times the size of these aircraft.
It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Good visibility.
are very similar to what we have here today. At altitude, we're at 4,000 feet. I could see the object, the one object to start with, and then the second object, quite clearly with the islands behind. And that was then when I got out the binoculars and had a good look. And I could see this perfect shape of a pointed object, very brilliant yellow, with a dark area, 2/3 from left to right, very clear. It was emitting light quite clearly. Both objects illuminating a fantastic amount of light. It was very brilliant and quite difficult to watch.
Were you able to see both of them simultaneously?
Not initially. Initially just one object. And then on descent, the second one became visual.
Roughly how big? Any idea?
I'd say at least a mile across.
Captain Boyer describes the two objects at a 15-to-1 ratio of length to height with a slightly elliptical appearance. The objects are also slightly tilted.
Was the sun visible at the same time?
The layer of cloud above was still covering. The sun would have been great because there would have been a shadow on the sea. It also gave us an exact position and a relative size, but there was no direct sunlight. That was a shame.
But as the objects continue to remain in view, the passengers are alerted that something is happening.
What about the passengers? Were they taking notice as well at this point?
When I was looking out with binoculars, the chap sat behind me was saying, "What is it? What's that?" Because he could see it. The people behind couldn't see it so well because of the people sat in front. But there are a couple of passengers sat in row 4, John and Kate Russell, they could see it also.
John and Kate Russell are frequent flyers on Orani. They make this trip from Southampton to their home on Alderney often. But they've flown with Captain Boyer on numerous occasions and have never seen him react as he did that day.
And Ray started sitting up in his seat and looking out through the windscreen. Well, you know, when a pilot starts moving around, you begin to wonder what's going on. Then he got out his binoculars. And again, this is rather puzzling because he knows the way.
Ray dipped the nose of the aircraft down. He'd been pointing out something to the person just behind him. So I looked out and I saw a bright light just about there and another beyond it, which was smaller. I thought the second light looked as if it could have been over the island.
Kate, my wife, who was sitting where you are, she then drew my attention to what they were looking at. A couple of orange lights down below the aircraft on the right-hand side. I leant over her. At this point, there was only one light. A sort of orangey yellow, almost like a football shape.
But John and Kate quickly dismiss the idea that these lights are mere reflections.
We're going south. The sun is to the south of us, the sun reflects, yes, fine, but we're doing 120 knots. Therefore the angle's changing all the time, and this light was constant.
So you're saying it couldn't have been a reflection?
No, it couldn't.
If the sun's reflection had been responsible, the high speed of the aircraft would have eventually caused the light's appearance to change. But, according to John and Kate, this doesn't happen. They are able to see the objects for 3 to 4 minutes, and Captain Boyer has been observing them for 15. And as they get closer and closer, his concern is growing.
When you saw these two objects, what were you thinking? Were you scared?
These things were getting pretty hefty, pretty big, and I didn't want to go any closer with the passengers on board. These things were getting quite close now. But it was at that point, maybe when we were still 20 odd miles away from them, that I started to get somewhat trepidatious about the proximity. If they were moving, they were coming towards us, I didn't know. At that point, radar said they couldn't see anything, but I could see them, and they were big. They decided to come quickly at me. could have been scary, so we're just getting down and landing. That's what I was thinking at that point.
The plane descends quickly, and Captain Boyer loses sight of the objects. He is able to land safely. Despite the extraordinary circumstances, the passengers give Captain Boyer the highest marks for his reaction to the situation.
He's not a man who gets ruffled. Anytime you knew you were flying with Ray, you felt you were in very safe hands. For him to register the concern that he had meant that what he was experiencing was very abnormal.
Upon landing, Captain Boyer immediately asks for anyone who saw something unusual to leave their information. While the Russells do, some of the others don't want any further involvement.
Or do you feel now that you saw something highly unusual?
The more the time goes by, the more there is no absolute explanation.
Well, in the strict definition of the word, it was an unidentified flying object, because it certainly wasn't in the sea, therefore it had to be flying, and it was unidentified, and it was an object, so it was a UFO, wasn't it?
You've been a pilot for quite a long time before this.
Yeah, 20 years on.
And how long had you been flying this route?
That route at that time, about 8 years.
So you knew it like the back of your hand?
Yeah, probably 2,000 or 3,000 times, you know. It's extremely difficult trying to explain to people what this is all about. And for me, it was so unusual that there's no precedent. I've seen nothing like it previously. I don't expect I'll see anything like it again.
While nothing matching Captain Boyer or John and Kate Russell's description has been seen since, another pilot's sighting of an alleged giant UFO in 1994 has striking similarities.
The dimension was huge, absolutely huge.
In April 2007, Captain Ray Boyer and several of his passengers aboard an Orani Airlines flight see two objects hovering above the English Channel. The objects are estimated to be at least a mile wide. While sightings of this magnitude are rare, they have happened before. January 28, 1994. On Air France Flight 3532, Captain Jean-Charles Duboc is en route from Nice to London. His plane is near Paris, flying at 39,000 feet. The airspace here is typically crowded, but today it's going to have one more aircraft than usual.
We are meeting with retired Air France Captain Jean-Charles Duboc, whose sighting in 1994 of an object over Paris was one of the most incredible stories in ufology.
Captain Duboc is telling his story for the first and only time on American television.
It was a very beautiful weather. We were approaching Paris, and the steward who was in the cockpit said, oh, a weather balloon.
So it was the steward who first said there's a weather balloon there, and then the co-pilot who said there was something there, and that's what directed your attention.
I saw it, yes, it was on our left, and we look at this object during 1 or 2 minutes.
Though Captain Duboc's steward and co-pilot initially think they've spotted a rogue weather balloon, they quickly change their minds. The object is far too large.
And it was at roughly the same altitude you were saying?
It's below us. It was below us.
Below you?
Below us.
But how many feet below you?
4,000 feet. We are 39. It was about 35,000 feet. And so it was really surprising. The dimension was huge, absolutely huge, because the distance was about 25 miles, and at 25 miles you cannot see a plane.
When did you realize it wasn't a plane?
We all immediately identified this object as not a plane. It was different of a plane or a balloon or something. It was absolutely abnormal.
As the object moves towards them, they come to a shocking realization. What they're looking at appears to be a huge flying disc.
What's incredibly striking to me about Captain Dubock's sighting is he's a trained observer, being a pilot, and he was with two other people who witnessed this object. And it's apparently about 1,000 feet across, disc-shaped, in broad daylight. And that doesn't sound like a conventional aircraft to me.
It was red brown with a red color, very curious. And it was some kind of haze.
Captain Duboc describes the red-brown disc as having a strange haze or fuzziness at its edges. And as he watches, he says it appears to be banking at a 45-degree angle. He estimates its size to be between 800 and 1,000 feet, or more than 6 times the size of his own jetliner. But what happens next is even more surprising.
So after 1 minute, it became transparent and disappeared.
So did it disappear quickly or gradually become transparent?
Oh, he became gradually transparent.
Like it dematerialized.
When the object seems to disappear, Captain Duboc, his co-pilot, and his steward realize they are dealing with something extraordinary.
Two of the most striking details to me are the huge size of that object. It wasn't the size of a plane, it was much larger. And then when the object seemed to dematerialize before his very eyes, what was the conversation in the cockpit of the plane about this?
Yes, it was, what was this thing? It's impossible to create such a huge ship and which able to disappear like that, with such a fuzzy characteristic, with this color and this appearance. We cannot do that.
Captain Duboc radios in his sighting immediately to REM's air traffic control in northern France. They confirm his sighting with radar from CODA, the Operational Center of Air Defense. Their radar registers a nearly 1-minute hit, which crosses the path of Captain Duboc's Air France flight and then disappears. Despite the surprising detail, Captain Duboc remains silent for 3 years after his sighting. Neither his co-pilot nor his steward make a report. But in 1997, he finally comes forward with his story. 2 years later, it becomes one of the top cases in the Cometa Report, a 1999 document put forth by an independent defense think tank and sent to the French government. The report uses well-documented sightings, such as Captain Duboc's, to make the case that UFOs need to be treated seriously and as a matter of national security.
Were you impressed by the conclusions of the Cometa Report that these were military issues that had to be addressed?
Yes, I was very impressed. I realized it was beyond all everything I could imagine. It was really, really crazy. We cannot imagine the technology.
And that's the message of the Cometa Report itself, isn't it?
Yes.
The Cometa Report basically just says that we can no longer ignore the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
Exactly.
The report concludes, quote, "These studies demonstrate the almost certain physical reality of completely unknown flying objects. They must be the subject of indispensable speculations and the development of prospective scenarios."
So what you take away from the meeting with Captain Duboc are his impressions of the size of the object. This was clearly something not a plane. And Captain Duboc went on to research what we have to do to understand what UFOs are and why they're here.
What are these giant objects being seen by pilots? another recent sighting by 2 U.S. Air Force F-15s is captured on tape and raises an entirely new theory.
I have no idea what it was, just to stay away from 17,000.
Two pilots claim to have recent encounters with colossal-sized UFOs. Both accounts come from highly experienced pilots. Both are corroborated by radar and other witnesses. But now, a third sighting raises a new theory. Could these alleged giant UFOs be deploying smaller objects? The team heads to the Museum of Science and Industry in Manchester.
We're meeting with British UFO researcher Philip Mansell to talk to him about a case that he's been investigating involving F-15s that were scrambled to check out a UFO.
January 12, 2007. Just 3 months before Captain Boyer's sighting of two gigantic objects, 2 U.S. Air Force F-15s out of the Royal Air Force Base at Lakenheath are asked to intercept a target picked up on radar. But this object isn't a giant. Its size is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. These are the actual in-flight audio transmissions.
All right, dude, no kidding. I had a radar hit. There was something there.
The sighting is investigated by Phil Mantle and other British UFO researchers at UFO Data magazine. They receive the audio from aviation enthusiasts who pick up the transmissions on scanners.
We know where it came from. We even know the call sign of the two aircraft that were involved. We know the date where the incident took place. We've had it independently verified by the Ministry of Defence. It is the genuine article.
Phil and his partners received this official response from the Ministry of Defense. Quote, I understand that 2 USAF aircraft spotted an object on their onboard radar. But the MOD does not investigate or seek to provide a precise explanation for each of the 200 to 300 UFO reports we receive every year.
Well, they're not denying it occurred. They're just saying that as far as they're concerned, there's an explanation for it. It was something to do with a weather balloon.
To follow up on this theory, Phil and his colleagues contact the Met Office, the UK's National Meteorological Service. They inquire about the possibility of a weather balloon in the area of the North Sea where the Air Force's F-15s were flying. They are told there were none in the area. For now, with the MOD dismissing the event as a weather balloon and the pilots remaining anonymous, the audio transmissions are the only evidence.
So gentlemen, this is really exciting. This is the actual live recording of the interaction between two F-15 pilots and an object.
I had a radar hit. There was something there. It looked like it didn't look like a bird. It looked like, no kidding, a rock to me.
First is a radar return.
And he says it looks like a rock to me.
I have no idea what it was, but basically just heads up, try to stay away from 17,000. I have no idea what it was. I'm going to use my radar to see if I can pick this object up again. I picked it up twice.
So obviously, what are we getting? It is unknown, it's unidentified. Visually, the pilots can't make out what it is.
Most close sightings of UFOs described objects at least the size of common man-made aircraft. And the objects seen recently by pilots have been enormous. But this object is incredibly small, described as a rock. Yet, according to the pilot's descriptions, it seems to be under intelligent control.
It just flew right over me.
Confirm the object appears stationary.
But it went from 17 the first time I saw it to 17.7, so it's not falling.
The object now appears to be inexplicably rising.
So not only is it an object they can't identify, it's an object, Phil, it's doing maneuvers, it sounds like, and they can't identify what the maneuvers are.
Exactly.
But what's really amazing is how calm these pilots are. They're not excited. They're just saying, what they're seeing.
I want to try to look at it, and then you follow in behind me if you can. I've got it 17,000 feet, 8 miles off my nose, 2.5 miles off my nose right now, 17,000 feet. I have visual now. I'm going to fly underneath you.
His wingman is behind him at this point, so he can't slow down. He's dropping down 2,000 feet to get under it.
Yeah, I got some actual goosebumps there when he's talking about merging. You could just imagine these planes going so fast, and here comes this strange rock-shaped object that they're looking at. It's two pilots, two radar lock-ons, two guys saying that they don't know what this thing is.
After one last pass, the two pilots lose sight of the object.
I don't want to circle back around. Hopefully we'll be able to see it. Did you see anything? Negative.
No other evidence of the event has emerged since, and many of Phil's Freedom of Information Act requests are still outstanding.
Interesting to see how the MOD has shrugged this thing off, saying, well, we don't investigate UFOs that don't constitute a threat. Guess what? Here's an object over secure airspace. This tape can turn out to be one of the most critical UFO sightings in all of British ufology.
And the F-15 account has striking similarities to another important pilot encounter. In the 1986 Japanese Airlines sighting, the pilot referred to two smaller objects that accompanied a third gigantic UFO. He referred to the largest object as a, quote, mothership, and theorized that the two smaller objects were ships sent from it, in the same way that aircraft carriers are used by the military. Could it be that smaller UFOs, like the one witnessed by the F-15 pilots, are coming from larger ships, such as those seen by Ray Boyer and Jean-Charles Duboc? With these new types of sightings come theories on both sides of the UFO debate. Could bizarre weather phenomena be responsible? Or does the evidence suggest something else?
For two pilots to see a mirage or a reflection of the same image is very unlikely.
Sightings of alleged giant UFOs have perplexed pilots and witnesses who have seen these colossal objects. But some scientists believe atmospheric conditions could be the missing explanation. Ted and Pat head to the University of Manchester to get this developing theory.
We're about to meet with Dr. Grant Allen, who's an expert in atmospheric science. We're going to have a look at a number of possible explanations for our case.
There are lots of different atmospheric phenomena that could be mistaken for UFOs. I mean, there are many tricks that the atmosphere can play with.
One of these phenomena are lenticular clouds. These clouds have the appearance of lenses or disks, one of the most common shapes of reported UFOs.
Lenticular clouds are a special type of clouds. They're actually stationary. They don't move like most other clouds you might see in the sky. They appear to be stationary, and they're also very smooth.
The clouds form when strong winds come over high ground, such as a hill or mountain. As the air is lifted, the water it carries condenses and forms a cloud with a smooth top and smooth edges. Their appearance is typically quite large and can stretch over several miles, and they can appear to be very strange when compared to the clouds surrounding them.
So to form a lenticular cloud, wouldn't you need some sort of topographic formation to move the air up into the atmosphere like that?
Yeah, you need a very significant hill or mountain, and crucially as well, very strong wind speeds.
So is that likely to happen over the English Channel?
Well, you get strong wind speeds. There aren't many islands, so you wouldn't expect to see many lenticular clouds in the Channel.
Not only is the English Channel an unlikely location for these types of clouds, they are also almost exclusively found at high altitudes of 20 to 40,000 feet. Ray Boyer's sighting was only at 4,000 feet, and Charles Duboc's sighting near Paris, though at the correct altitude range, describes a tilting object. Lenticular clouds have little to no movement in the sky, and these types of clouds are never detected by radar.
What about sundogs?
Sundogs are a phenomenon related to ice crystals in the atmosphere. Whenever the sun is low on the horizon, sort of at sunset, ice crystals in the atmosphere on the horizon can bend sunlight. Now this has the effect of forming patches of light either side of the sun.
Though bearing no resemblance to Captain Duboc's reddish-brown disk, could bright yellow sundogs be what Captain Boyer saw over the English Channel? Sundogs typically appear in pairs and have the same bright yellow-orange characteristic of Boyer's objects. But sundogs mostly appear at sunrise or at sunset on the horizon. Ray Boyer's encounter occurs at 3 p.m.
Sundogs actually are fairly rare, and they look quite striking when you see them in the atmosphere because they're quite unusual. Most people would realise it's a patch of light and not a solid object.
But Dr. Allen has his own theory on the Ray Boyer sighting.
Having looked at some data for the area, there is evidence for a very strong temperature inversion in the atmosphere.
Temperature typically decreases with height in the atmosphere. An inversion occurs when the temperature increases with height. When this happens, the inversion layer can act as a mirror, reflecting or even sometimes bending light along the atmosphere. The inversion could not only create bright objects like Captain Boyer describes, but false hits on radar known as anomalous propagation.
What about these brown or gray bands that Captain Boyer describes?
Well, that could be explained by an object in the path of the rays of light. So if there was a very small cloud in the path that the light has taken, then it would appear as a shadow on that object.
But the idea of a temperature inversion may be put to rest by a recently issued analysis from several atmospheric researchers who published a thorough report on Captain Boyer's sighting in 2008. According to the research into the event, quote, the triangulated apparent location of UAP number 1 near Alderney was intersected by the reciprocal sightline from Captain Patterson to an unusual yellow object at a similar height in a similar location. What this means is that if Captain Boyer was seeing a reflection or other optical illusion from his sightline, it would be highly unlikely for the second pilot to see the same reflection illusion in the exact same place.
I think for two pilots in two completely different locations to see a mirage or a reflection of the same image is very unlikely.
Does that influence your opinion of your answer at all?
I think this is the most likely of a list of unlikely explanations.
Science continues to struggle with answers for the objects that these pilots are seeing. And witnesses remain resolved. These giant objects are not illusions.
People say they can't believe in UFOs, but here I don't think it's a matter of belief anymore. I mean, we've investigated the cases, we have audio evidence, we've talked to the pilots, we've got corroborating witnesses. It seems like regardless of what people believe, pilots are seeing UFOs.
If you think about these cases, the amount of air traffic is only increasing. I can only think over the course of the coming years, we're going to see more and more of these kinds of reports.
I think the reports will only proliferate. And we have a lot now, we're going to have even more in the future. In most investigations, sightings usually occur from the ground from far away. This is a whole new level of UFO encounter.
As sightings of UFOs continue to increase, are they getting closer and larger? Or are we finally getting the best glimpses of what's been in our skies all along?